And with my own gender discrimination experiences, International Women's Day is important to me personally. And for Future of Field Service, as a resource that reaches industries where many companies are working hard to improve diversity as a whole, we wanted to ensure we play an active role in International Women's Day and March as Women's History Month. So the plan is our content this month is going to be geared toward discussing some of the issues that are critical to inspiring inclusion, which is the theme for this year, and also focusing on elevating the voices of women in service and some of the women that have been important in sharing perspective in the Future of Field Service community. Welcome to the Future of Field Service podcast, where we deliver both information and inspiration on how to differentiate your business through service and lead through change. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro, and I'm here to guide you through conversations around the trends that matter most, from business transformation and customer-centric innovation to the service evolution and attributes of effective leadership. Join us on this journey as we welcome industry leaders, visionaries, and experts to share their personal stories of change, challenges, triumphs, and transformation. Let's dive in. Today, I am flying solo, and I am kicking off what will be a March-long celebration and acknowledgement of International Women's Day. International Women's Day is this Friday, March 8th. And this year's theme is Inspire Inclusion. I want to share a couple of things that International Women's Day states on their website, including that International Women's Day is powered by the collective efforts of all. It says, collective action and shared ownership for driving gender parity is what makes International Women's Day impactful. Gloria Steinem, world-renowned feminist, journalist, and activist, once explained, the story of women's struggle for equality belongs to no single feminist nor to any one organization, but to the collective efforts of all who care about human rights. This is why I believe International Women's Day is incredibly important and why we have some exciting content slated throughout the remainder of March to reinforce the themes that are especially important. As a woman, in this space that is still very male-centric, and with my own gender discrimination experiences, International Women's Day is important to me personally. And for Future of Field Service, as a resource that reaches industries where many companies are working hard to improve diversity as a whole, we wanted to ensure we play an active role in International Women's Day and March as Women's History Month. So the plan is our content this month is going to be geared toward discussing some of the issues that are critical to inspiring inclusion, which is the theme for this year, and also focusing on elevating the voices of women in service and some of the women that have been important in sharing perspective in the Future of Field Service community. We have some great podcast interviews coming up the remainder of this month, all related to these discussions. So please keep an eye out and stay tuned for those. I'm very excited for what's coming. But I wanted to start off this month-long focus by sharing today some of my favorite words of wisdom from women who have offered their expertise and experiences on the Future of Field Service podcast throughout the last year. So I'm going to go through some highlights. These are just some of the points that stood out to me personally from these women who came on, each of which had their own episode and interview. So we will make sure that we hyperlink each of the episodes in the show notes. I would suggest if you have the time to go back and listen to any of them in their entirety, it would be time well spent. So episode 206 was with Kate Donovan. Kate is a burnout expert and host of Fried, the Burnout podcast. Kate says, it's an individual's responsibility to recover from burnout, but I don't actually believe it's an individual's responsibility to avoid or prevent burnout. I think that it's a societal, cultural, organizational piece. So after everything that I've done, I can say with clarity that burnout is not ever an individual's fault. Never. I've never seen it be someone's fault. I really like this episode because burnout is a topic that we hear a lot about in headlines. And I think amid the challenges with talent overall and an increasing focus, rightfully so, on mental health and overall well-being in the workplace, this was a really good episode. And she is a great thought leader and expert in the space to check out. Episode 209 was with Trina Storgard Nielsen, who is the head of EMEA Ocean at Flexport. And Trina joined to share a logistic leader's perspective on innovation, digital transformation, diversity, and more. She said, today as a leader, you need to accept that there will be people around you who are smarter, who are maybe more well-educated than you, in some cases, even some who are better paid than you, because that is what's required to get the best talent. I think facilitating the diverse community where you combine the people who are experts in technology with people who are experts in business, because at the end of the day, digital transformation is all about taking something that we know and have done for many years and then doing it in a digital way. Trying to combine those two worlds, I think, requires a much more humble approach where you facilitate people rather than give all the answers. I love Trina's perspective on this for two reasons. One, she talks about how the importance of diversity is related to having this well-rounded team with different areas of expertise, different areas of knowledge, different previous experiences who come together to work toward a greater good. That is the whole point of having a diverse team and a diverse community. And it's the reason why International Women's Day is so important as part of that, certainly not the whole picture. I also like the point Trina makes about how leadership today requires leaders to be humble. I like this point because I think it ties in with a lot of the content that we do around leadership, where historically, in the ways that we worked, leaders often were expected to have all of the answers, to know what the right thing is at any given time. And Trina talks in this episode about her own recognition and an acknowledgement of that shift, that it is no longer a leader's role to have all of those answers, but rather to bring together a diverse group of people that can find the answers together. The next episode is episode 217 with author Meeta Malik on debunking the myths that impede workplace inclusion. This interview was centered around Meeta's new book, Reimagine Inclusion, Debunking 13 Myths to Transform Your Workplace. Meeta says there are a lot of great books about diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership out in the marketplace. I wanted to say the quiet parts out loud. I felt like there were myths and stories we were holding on to that stop us from making meaningful progress because we just believe these things are true and they hold us back. I guess I'll use your language. Let's cut through the BS. Let's talk about what's really happening, because we can't change what we won't discuss. If you're not going to talk about the tough thing, the hard thing, whether that's at home or at work, how are you going to actually see progress happen? You won't, because you're keeping it undercover, keeping it hidden. Meeta is an amazing voice on inclusion, and she is a great person to follow on LinkedIn. She's very active in creating content. Obviously, her book is a great book to read related to the topic of inclusion. And she also co-hosts a podcast, so you can find that on her LinkedIn profile as well. But wonderful conversation, very directly related to our focus this month, and a great thought leader to know and to follow. Episode 221 was with Marie Cabesi, who is the Director of After Sales Service Projects and Transformation at Fnac Darty in France, discussing the pillars of transformation in play for the company. This session was from our live tour event in Paris in 2023. And Marie had so many great insights to share around how Darty prioritizes transformation, also about how important it is to create a culture of continuous innovation. So those insights are well worth listening to. What I wanted to share today is related to the topic of gender equity. Marie says, my position is that women should be more represented at every step of the organization. In service, could be from technicians to management, because it's the only way to change people's minds. If you don't see any women, how can you refer to and say, yes, I know that? We have some women technicians, a few, but we have said it's possible, so you can be a woman and a technician. Then maybe one day more will say, why not me? We can change things. We need to maintain this representation of women and to put them into the spotlight to be able to recruit more women. It's the only way. My peers are only men, of course, and speaking for myself, I prefer to see it as an asset. So this idea of representation in different layers of the business is really important. And we have a podcast coming up this month where we talk about some successful efforts in improving gender diversity in field service, but also talking about how it is important to do so, not just to bring more diverse candidates into the business, but to ensure that they continue to progress throughout the business into leadership roles, and that diversity and women, particular to this month's topic, are represented at all levels of the organization. Episode 224, we were joined by Lauren Winans, who is the CEO of Next Level Benefits and an HR expert, to discuss the topic of, is the soft skills gap growing? Lauren says, the turnover that you will have if you don't think about employees as human beings is going to cost you so much more than if you just look at each tool, each piece of technology, each process, each policy, and think with the lens of, will this help or hurt the employees? Because the employees are what's going to drive your business. They're what's going to be there to provide whatever support is necessary to your clients or your customers. This makes me think of the fact that we have a goal in the service landscape of increasing diversity in the workforce. I think that's a shared objective by many, many organizations. But we need to think about not only how do we get more diverse candidates into the business, but what will their experience be once they are a part of our business? So coming back to the theme of International Women's Day and inspiring inclusion, we need to reflect on, is our workplace inclusive? Is our culture inclusive? Do we have leaders, to Lauren's point, who are looking at our employees as human beings and thinking not about how we drive the most out of them, but how we balance their wishes, desires, and objectives with that of the business in a way that is mutually beneficial. The next that I'd like to go over is episode 226. This is an episode with two folks, Christine Miners and Rick Lash, who are co-authors of the book Once Upon a Leader. They spoke last year at Field Service Palm Springs. That's how I came upon them. And they came on the podcast to talk about how leaders can nurture empowerment. So Christine said, one common mindset trap that comes to mind is a leader thinking, I'm only adding value when I'm getting stuff done. And I think that this is problematic because if I'm only adding value when I'm getting stuff done, that's management at most, but it's certainly not leadership. Leadership, yes, is about driving results, but it's not about checking things off a list and bringing things to completion. And I think where that gets leaders in trouble is when they've got capacity to actually sit and think and reflect and do the kind of thinking that would allow them to create clarity and empower people in their environment. They have this feeling often of guilt or not knowing what to do with that time because they fall into the mindset trap of feeling like if they're not always doing something, they're not creating value for the organization. This entire episode was a good episode. And even more so, I would say having a read of Rick and Christine's book, Once Upon a Leader, is such a valuable idea because we do need to start to draw this distinction between what is management and what is leadership, and how do we create, accept, and acknowledge that leaders need that space to think strategically, to be able to bring creativity back into their roles and find new and different ways to not only nurture and empower their employees, but work toward those innovative ideas for the business. Episode 236 was with Sarah Smith, Director of Global Service Change Enablement at Waters Corporation, on how change management needs have evolved in service. Again, this episode is interesting to go and have a listen to because what we're talking about is the fact that Sarah is now in the company's first change enablement specific role. So historically, when they had change management needs, they would work with a consultant or they would have someone fill that need within a project on a temporary basis. This is the first time that they've created a role specific to this need. And we talk a lot about why and how things in service have changed to the degree that this may be a really good idea for companies to consider. However, what I want to share with you today is actually about Sarah's career trajectory because she started in toxicology and then transitioned to field service beginning as a service technician at Waters. And she talks a lot about her experiences and her progression from technician to manager on to her current role today. But she talks about, quite frankly, some of the harassment she experiences when she begins as a technician. And she says, these kinds of things, while they don't happen every day, they do happen. And on a more regular daily basis, I feel like respect to your proficiency in the role is never assumed and it has to be earned. When you walk through the door as a woman to a new customer that you may have never met or seen before, there may be that unconscious bias of, well, she's not going to be able to do what our other technician could. And when you get that fixed, the satisfaction you receive from turning the doubters into believers of your abilities, that was one of the highlights and positives for me about being in field service. I love that feeling of fixing things. So Sarah talks a lot about some of the things she experienced firsthand that I think as an industry, we need to be very cognizant that women we bring into field technician roles may very well experience as well. I think keeping these stories hidden means that less people understand some of those realities. And when we don't understand them or don't want to explore them, it's really challenging to figure out how to resolve them. And while in Sarah's situation, sometimes these were things being said or done by the customers. Well, we can't necessarily control environments that our workers may enter into and what might happen there. We do need to sort out how we make them feel empowered and how we make them feel supported. And certainly we need to reflect on, are any of those things happening within our own organization? And how do we make sure that that's not the case? And how do we create an environment that is not only inclusive, but appropriate? No one should go to work fearing being harassed. And so that is a reality, though, when you have women entering into these roles. So it's something to be conscious of. Episode 241 was with Linda Tucci, Senior Global Director for Technical Solutions Center at Cadell Ortho. Linda is someone I just love and adore. She has been on the podcast before talking about leadership. It is something that she's just amazing at. Her perspective on it, her commitment to self-reflection, her willingness to be vulnerable are just all phenomenal. But this time, she joined me to very bravely and very authentically share what she has learned about leadership in her recent journey with breast cancer. So Linda says, now clearly, I'm very comfortable speaking about my experience and not just how I process. I love sharing and hearing from others and learning from our respective journeys. But if I truly want to meet people where they are, I have to make sure that I ask good questions, that I don't jump to assumptions, that I am really looking at them holistically, especially in my roles at work. I would say it takes work. For me, compassion being a core value, it's more important than ever that my words and actions are aligned. The leaders that I found most inspirational have been the ones that are the most relatable. They're able to share their stories so that connection is made, that what they say has meaning or relevance, and that I can count on them. They're trustworthy. For me, even more so, I really reflect on that. How am I showing up at work? And am I validating with others? Is this how you're experiencing me? I love her willingness to self-reflect and think about, I have a perception of who I am as a person and how I'm showing up. But is that intention, is that perception reflected by the people that I am actually engaging with? She really wants to know those answers, and she's really willing to dig into any feedback or any disparities and do the work to change that. She's a phenomenal human being, and I definitely would recommend you go back and listen to that entire episode. Episode 246 is with Carolyn Hagstrom Markland, who is the managing director for Vattenfall Customer Service. This is a session from the Future of Field Service live tour in Stockholm last fall. And Carolyn joined us to talk about the company's award-winning People First strategy. Again, there are some incredible insights in this episode because one of the things Carolyn wanted to be sure to do in this session is sort of break the myth that a people first strategy is somehow soft or fluffy. So she has a real business lens to why this focus is important and the way that it's benefited their business. And she shares a lot of that and also some of the challenges that she faced in taking this strategy, this intention, and turning it into a reality. Carolyn says, we've been through a number of decades of automation and lean processes, and now the tasks that are in our hands are way more complex than what they used to be. In order to sort that out, people need to feel enabled and engaged. Work is more and more relationship focused. It's about relationships with customers, with clients, within the organization, with colleagues, and all of that. If you're going to maneuver that world, you need to be given a lot of trust and freedom. It would be weird of me as a leader to say that I know what all of the 400 people here in this organization need to do because I don't. I need to trust them that they know what to do if I tell them what the final goal is. I think more complex environments, a more harsh overall climate in the world is leaning us towards this. So I agree. And I think that when we reflect on some of the talent gap or talent challenges that we talk about, part of that comes back to we want people on our team who are incredibly competent, who are driven, who are self-starters, who are really good at building relationships with customers. But then we want to tell them prescriptively what to do and how to do it. And those two things just don't align. And I think the more that we can embrace the thinking that a people first strategy can work and that trusting our people and empowering them to make choices and to be authentic to themselves and to figure out how they can best work to meet a certain goal is a really fresh perspective. And lastly, episode 248 was with Anne Sorensen, who leads global competence development at Alfa Laval. And this session is also from that Stockholm event. And Anne came to discuss what competence development and workforce enablement look like today. And she says, our competence focus has shifted. We are focusing much more on the attitude and behavior than we have ever done. Of course, there needs to be basic technical knowledge, but we're looking far more for adaptability, agility, and the desire for continuous learning. So I think this shift in focus is shared by many, many, many service organizations. And I honestly think that it reinforces the need to continue to focus on diversity. Of course, this month we're talking about gender equity, but I always am referring to diversity in all shapes and sizes. It's diversity of thought that helps organizations be more innovative, more creative, to grow, to expand. And I think that continuing to look for ways to bring people into the business that have different skills, different abilities, different perspectives, different backgrounds. Yes, it's a different way of doing things, but I think we only stand to gain from making those changes. So I am so thankful and honored to have had each of these women involved in the Future of Field Service community throughout the past year and coming to contribute their insights, their opinions, their expertise, and often their very personal journeys, stories, and lessons. So thank you so much to each and every one of you. And I would absolutely recommend going back to listen to some of those episodes. These are women that they lead with passion, they speak out on what they feel is important, and they are really setting a great example for others and also sharing voices that are important for everyone to listen to learn from, and to consider when we think about inspiring inclusion. So a helpful recap for everyone that some of those points stood out to you, and also that you'll go back and check out some of the full episodes. I'm excited, super excited for the content that we have planned and prepared for this month. I think you will find it insightful and thought-provoking, and hopefully it will inspire you to think about how you can contribute to the idea of inspiring inclusion. So stay tuned for more. As always, I welcome your feedback. So please feel free to reach out anytime if you have questions, thoughts, or ideas. And thank you for listening. You can find more always on futureoffieldservice.com. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. And as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to the Future of Field Service podcast. We hope today's conversation has provided you with a light bulb moment or given you some valuable food for thought. To learn more about any of the topics discussed in this episode, visit us at futureoffieldservice.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate us on your favorite podcast platform to help others join the conversation. Also remember to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a future episode. The Future of Field Service podcast is published in partnership with IFS. To learn more, visit ifs.com. On behalf of everyone at Future of Field Service, thank you for listening.